The door clicked shut behind me, but the apartment didn't feel like home. It felt wrong. There was a silence too absolute, too deliberate, like something sacred had been scrubbed away. I stood still in the entryway, the grocery bag slipping slightly in my hand, keys still dangling from my fingers. The evening sun slanted through the window, but it illuminated nothing familiar. Her bed was gone. The soft beige cushion with the embroidered name Maple that usually sat under the sill vanished. The rope toy she always chewed to shreds and dragged across the floor, not a trace. Even her food and water bowls, perfectly placed beside the kitchen counter, were gone. I dropped the bag. Something inside cracked loudly as an apple rolled out across the tile, but I barely noticed. Maple! My voice came out too loud in the stillness, echoing off empty space. My chest tightened as I stepped into the living room. The air felt sterile, lifeless. No scratches on the hardwood floor. No tufts of blonde fur caught in the corners. Just nothing. It was like she'd never existed. I moved mechanically from room to room, opening every door, checking every closet. My brain knew she wouldn't be there. Maple never hid. She greeted me every single time I walked through that door, her whole body wagging, her head nudging my hip before sitting neatly to wait for her signal. She was never late. She was never absent. Until now. My phone buzzed against my hip. A single text from Mom. Come by the house when you get home. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, the words blurring for a moment. My heart had already started to tumble into some dark, bottomless place. And yet, I replied with nothing. Just grabbed my coat again, keys in hand. The drive from Portland to Crescent Hill only takes 20 minutes. That night, it felt like crossing a continent. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my breath steady in a way I'd trained it to be. 15 years in state-level crisis management had taught me how to keep calm when everything around me caught fire. But this wasn't work. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't someone else's emergency. This was mine. And deep down, I already knew. Maple was gone. But they didn't know what they'd just taken from me. Not yet. The porch light was on when I pulled up to my parents' house. Same yellow glow. Same cracked step I'd tripped on 1,000 times as a kid. Same flower beds Mom still kept meticulous, geraniums, even in October, lined up like soldiers. Everything looked so familiar, but nothing felt safe. I didn't knock. I never had to. I just opened the door and stepped inside. Mom was already waiting in the hallway, arms crossed. Her mouth tightened when she saw me, like she'd been preparing for a confrontation, but wasn't sure how to play it. I didn't greet her. I didn't take off my coat. Where's Maple? She didn't flinch, didn't blink, just said it like she was announcing a change in the weather. We gave her to Crescent Hill Animal Services. Pets are too expensive. We needed the money for bills. For a moment, I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then I nodded just once. Bills are important. That startled her. I saw it, the flicker of surprise, even a little smugness rising behind her eyes. She thought I'd understood, that I was being reasonable, that I'd rolled over. She stepped aside. Come in, we'll explain. Dad was in his recliner, feet up, watching some rerun of a game show. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge me, but he didn't mute the TV either. That was his language, quiet agreement by inaction. I sat on the edge of the couch, still wearing my coat, hands folded neatly in my lap. I stared at my mother. She was already shifting into explanation mode. You know how tight things have been. Your father's medications went up again. The mortgage, utilities, food. And with you always buying that high-end dog food, those toys, the vet appointments, it just wasn't practical anymore. She was mine, I said, voice steady. You're always so logical about things, Harper. You always said we needed to budget better. This is budgeting. I smiled faintly. She'll be fine, Mom continued. She's a beautiful dog. They said she'd find a new home, quickly. probably with a family who can actually afford to care for her. A jab, a message. They weren't just trying to save money. They were trying to punish me for prioritizing Maple, for not handing over more when they needed it. I kept my voice calm. How much do you think you'll save? That lit her up. Mom loved numbers, loved being practical. Well, just the food alone was $60 a month. Then that ear infection last spring? $200. And don't even get me started on grooming. Dad chimed in, still not looking at me. $1.40 every 6 weeks. For what? Mom added, you spend more on that dog than we spend on groceries. Honestly, Harper, it wasn't even necessary. She's just a pet. Just a pet. I felt my nails bite into my palms, but my expression didn't change. I let her finish, let her feel triumphant. Then I said, you're right. Those expenses do add up. Her eyes lit up, victorious. I knew you'd see it logically. I nodded again. She was just a pet. And in that moment, they truly believed they'd won. Back at my apartment, the silence felt deeper. Not the emptiness of absence, but the weight of betrayal. I didn't take off my shoes. I didn't sit down. I walked straight to the filing cabinet in my home office, pulled open the drawer labeled medical and legal, and began sorting. Everything was there. Maple's service dog certification from Cascade Service Animals in Colorado. Her state disability registration, listing me as her sole handler. The federal documents classifying her as durable medical equipment under the Americans with Disabilities Act. The psychological evaluation from 2 years ago, the one that formally diagnosed me with chronic PTSD related to prolonged secondary trauma in crisis intervention roles. Even the receipts, $25,470 in total. Tuition for her training, travel for handler boot camp, equipment, follow-up sessions. They thought she was a luxury, like a designer handbag I'd splurged on after a rough week. But Maple wasn't about comfort. She was about survival. I had never told my parents about the diagnosis, not when the flashback started, not when I began avoiding loud restaurants and public gatherings, not when I started sleeping on the floor by the door during storm season. To them, I was just their practical daughter, the one with the stable job, the steady paycheck, the logical mind who always picked up the phone when things fell apart. They didn't know about the first panic attack at work, or the way Maple would nudge my knee just before it hit, anchoring me back with her presence. They didn't see her press against my body at night to keep the nightmares at bay. They didn't know the way she positioned herself behind me in checkout lines, creating a bubble of space so I wouldn't spiral from sensory overload. They didn't know because they never asked, and now they'd taken her, because she was just a pet. I opened my laptop, created a new folder on the desktop. Incident Maple, October 12th. I began compiling everything. Screenshots of the text from Mom, a transcript of our conversation, quotes, dates, estimated value, federal protections, the shelter's name, their exact phrasing, she's not necessary. My fingers moved fast, precise. I'd processed disability claims for over a decade. I knew how to write reports. I knew how to build evidence. I knew how to win when it came to systems and law. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't scream. I documented, because I wasn't just going to get Maple back. I was going to show them exactly who they had underestimated. The next morning, I called Crescent Hill Animal Services as soon as they opened. The woman who answered sounded chipper, casual, someone who clearly hadn't read the storm coming her way. Animal Services, this is Melanie. How can I help you? I'm calling about a golden retriever, mix named Maple. She was brought in yesterday. One moment! I heard clicking in the background, then a pause. Yes, she's here. Beautiful dog. Very calm. Well trained. Are you interested in adoption? No. She's mine, I said. She's a certified service dog, and she was taken from my residence illegally. There was a longer pause this time. The people who brought her in said she was theirs. They signed the surrender form, they lied. I have documentation. Federal certification, state registration, psychological evaluations, receipts. Service dogs are protected by law and cannot be surrendered by anyone other than their registered handler. That's me. I see, Melanie said, suddenly less casual. In that case, we'll need you to bring in those documents. I'll be there in an hour. It took closer to 3. They didn't make it easy, not because they were malicious, but because bureaucracy never is. I handed over the manila folder I'd assembled overnight, watched as one staff member, then a supervisor, then a legal liaison reviewed each page. Federal ADA statute, state disability law, training, certifications, medical necessity. When they finally brought Maple out from the back kennels, I nearly collapsed. She spotted me before I saw her, her paws skidding on the linoleum floor, tail wagging so hard it knocked a clipboard off a table. She made a high-pitched whine, that sound she only made when she was holding back from leaping until I gave the release. I knelt down and whispered the word, "Come." She barreled into me, knocking me backwards. Her body shook with excitement, head tucked under my chin, pressing so hard it was like she wanted to crawl inside my rib cage and stay there. And I let her. Melanie stood nearby, watching us with a look that wasn't pity but shame. "We had no idea," she said softly. "The people who brought her in, they were very convincing. They seemed genuinely worried about the cost of keeping her." "They were worried about costs," I replied, clipping Maple's leash back onto her harness, "but not about consequences." We walked out together, just like we always had, side by side, one step at a time. Maple sat in the passenger seat with her head out the window, the wind catching her fur, just the way she liked. Everything felt right again, but something inside me had shifted. They'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And now it was my turn to decide what came next. That night, while Maple slept curled at my feet, her breathing slow, steady, grounding, I opened my banking app. I didn't hesitate. I went straight to the automatic transfer that covered Dad's medication copays. Canceled. The joint emergency savings account I'd quietly set up in their name 2 years ago, closed. The credit card I co-signed for Mom when her old one maxed out after the car repair, suspended. The monthly payments that kept their internet and phone service going, terminated. I wasn't angry. I wasn't impulsive. I was exacting, calm, methodical. For the past 24 months, I'd been their quiet safety net. Every time they stumbled, missed a bill, forgot a due date, couldn't afford a refill, I'd stepped in. Not because they demanded it, but because they didn't have to. Because I loved them. Because I thought that's what family meant. I pulled up the folder where I kept my receipts. There were dozens, hundreds, scanned invoices, Venmo screenshots, Excel sheets I'd built to keep track of which account paid which thing. Not out of suspicion, just habit. 15 years of managing benefit cases had trained me to document everything. The total at the bottom of the spreadsheet, $63,412.27. That's how much I had poured into them, quietly, patiently, consistently, without ever asking for a thank you. And they repaid me by giving away the one thing that allowed me to function like a whole person, because she was just a pet. They had no idea what they'd thrown away. I didn't rage. I didn't rant. I reconciled. I drew a line. And I made damn sure they'd feel it in every single corner of their lives. When I closed the banking app, I didn't feel regret. I felt relief. I looked down at Maple, who lifted her head as if sensing the change in me. Her eyes met mine, calm, steady, familiar. "You're home," I whispered. And this time, so was I. The first call came just after 9 p.m. "Harper." Mom's voice barked through the phone, sharp and panicked. "The bank says there's a problem with the emergency account." I was on the couch, Maple's head resting on my thigh, her eyes fluttering in sleep. "Which account?" I asked, though I already knew. "The savings account. The one you use for Dad's prescriptions and doctor visits. There's nothing in it. The card was declined. I closed it, I said simply. Silence. Then a brittle edge. You what? Why would you do that? You said pets were too expensive, I replied, stroking Maple's ears. That the money should go to bills instead. I'm following your logic. That's completely different, she snapped. That money is for actual emergencies, for real necessities. Like giving away someone's medical equipment to save $60 a month. More silence. I could hear Dad's voice in the background, confused and agitated. What's wrong? What's she saying? Mom's voice returned, slower now. Maple was a service dog. She is a certified service dog, I said. Registered. Protected by federal law. Trained to assist with post-traumatic stress disorder. She cost $25,000 to train, and she's not a luxury. She's not a hobby. She's not a pet. I paused, letting it sink in. She's the reason I can sleep through the night. Mom said nothing. You gave her away like she was a used couch. I didn't know, she whispered. But even she didn't sound like she believed herself. You didn't ask, I replied. You didn't check. You just decided you knew better and acted. We didn't mean to hurt you, but you did. Half an hour later, Dad called. I can't get my prescription, he said. The pharmacy said my insurance card isn't working. That's because I'm not covering the copays anymore. You set up the system. You've been paying it for months. I stopped. But I need those pills, he said. And for the first time, I heard something in his voice I'd never heard before. Not annoyance. Not disappointment. Not anger. Fear. Then you should have thought of that before you gave away my dog. He was quiet. Just a dog, he said finally, almost like a prayer. I stared at Maple, who looked back up at me, sensing my pulse spike. She pressed closer. She's a $25,000 service dog, trained to keep me alive, I said. But to you, she was just something inconvenient. I hung up without another word. No screaming. No dramatics. Just silence. And on the other end of that silence, they began to crumble. They showed up at my apartment the next morning. I saw them through the blinds, parked in their old SUV, arguing in hushed tones. Mom's hands waved in frantic gestures. Dad stared straight ahead, unmoving. After 10 minutes of visible debate, they finally climbed out and came to the door. I didn't open it right away. Maple stood beside me, alert but not tense. She didn't growl. She didn't bark. She simply positioned herself between me and the door, solid, steady, exactly as she'd been trained. When I finally opened it, I didn't smile. I didn't step aside. We need to talk, Mom said, her voice brittle from sleeplessness. Her eyes were red, swollen. Dad looked exhausted, shoulders slumped, hands wringing his old ball cap. I said nothing, just looked at them. We didn't understand about Maple, Dad said first. About her being medical equipment. Her name is Maple, I corrected. Right, he nodded. Maple. Mom stepped forward. We thought you were just spoiling her, spending too much money on a fancy dog when family needed help with real things. So you took her, I said flatly. She swallowed. We thought you'd understand, eventually. I tilted my head. Family should come first, right? Blood over everything. Dad nodded slowly. That's all we were trying to do. And when I asked, did you decide I wasn't family? That stopped them. The silence between us wasn't cold. It was heavy, like a collapsed ceiling. Behind them, I heard footsteps. Trevor. Of course. He lingered in the hallway, wearing sweatpants and entitlement. This is ridiculous, he said. Okay, sure, they messed up. But cutting them off over a dog? Seriously. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on Mom. Tell me something. Did you ask me before giving her away? She opened her mouth. Did you text? Call? Leave a note? Anything? No answer. Trevor stepped into the room uninvited. Come on, Harper. This is psycho. They raised you. They're your parents. I turned toward him. And I've supported them financially for 2 years. Paid the mortgage, the meds, the food, the heat. I didn't ask for praise. I asked for respect. He scoffed. It's just a dog. I looked down at Maple. Her ears twitched, reading the tension in the room. Eyes fixed on me, ready to act if I needed her. She's the reason I can leave the house, the reason I can work, the reason I didn't collapse after years of carrying all of you. Trevor opened his mouth again. I raised a hand. You don't get to talk about loyalty when you've never lifted a finger except to dial my number for help. The room froze. Even Trevor didn't have a comeback for that. And for the first time in years, they were finally listening. The unraveling wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was slow, methodical, and irreversible. Within 3 weeks, the mortgage default notice arrived at their doorstep. I didn't send it, obviously, but I recognized the formatting. I'd processed enough eviction prevention cases during my time in public service to know what came next. 2 weeks after that, Dad's medication ran out. Aunt Carol called to tell me he was having dizzy spells, but refusing to go to the ER. He says he's fine, she whispered, but I saw him nearly collapse just walking to the mailbox. I didn't respond. Mom's car broke down again. This time it wasn't the transmission, it was the alternator. She tried to get a repair estimate and was denied financing. I knew this because she left a voicemail that started with, "I know you're upset, but we really need your help this time." I deleted it before she finished. Trevor moved back in. I found out through a neighbor who sent me a picture. 3 adults now crammed into a 2-bedroom house with no air conditioning, no working stove, and no plan. They were unraveling, and I wasn't doing a damn thing to stop it, because for the first time, it wasn't my job to fix everything. They'd spent years depending on my silence, on my steadiness, on my sense of duty. They thought I'd always show up, always patch the holes they poked in the boat. They thought I'd always put them first, even when they treated me like I was expendable. But when they gave Maple away, without consent, without discussion, without a trace of regret, they sent a message loud and clear. You don't matter. Not as much as our bills. Not as much as our pride. Not even as much as $60 a month. Now the message had been returned. And this time, it came with consequences. I blocked every number that came through. I ignored every voicemail. I left unopened every email with a subject line like, "Just one more thing," or "Please read." Because it was no longer about punishing them. It was about protecting myself. For the first time in years, I wasn't exhausted. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't bracing for another crisis. I was just free. And in the quiet of that freedom, while Maple lay stretched across my living room rug like she owned the world, I realized something. I hadn't lost a family. I'd just finally seen them for who they really were. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I saw her again. I was at the local grocery store, picking up Maple's favorite chew bones and a few things for dinner. The store was quiet, midweek calm, the kind of peace I had grown to love. I was halfway down the cereal aisle when I saw her. Mom. She was standing alone near the end cap, clutching a handful of paper coupons. Her cart was barely filled, mostly generic brand items, all marked with discount stickers. She didn't notice me at first. Not until I moved closer, reaching for a box of oats. Her head snapped up. Her face shifted through a storm of emotions. Shame, surprise, something dangerously close to hope. "Harper," she said softly like a prayer. I said nothing. "You look well," she offered. "I heard you bought a house." "I did," I replied. "Big yard. Maple loves having space to run." She flinched at the name. I saw her fingers tighten around the cart handle. That's good," she said. "Really good." The silence stretched between us, heavy and awkward, like we were strangers in a shared dream we didn't want to remember. "I want you to know," she continued, "we understand now. About Maple. About what she really meant to you. Do you?" I asked. She nodded eagerly. We were wrong. We made a terrible mistake. I looked at her, really looked. She was thinner, older. Her eyes, once sharp and calculating, looked tired, like someone who had cried more in the last year than in the rest of her life combined. Is there any way we can fix this somehow? She asked. I took a breath. My voice came out quiet but clear. I don't know. She blinked, caught off guard. But we're trying now. We want to make things right. We finally understand. Do you? I repeated, because trying means more than regret. It means understanding that Maple isn't negotiable, that my boundaries aren't suggestions, that my disability is real, even if you can't see it. She hesitated, then nodded again. We do. We really do. I watched her, searching her face, not for sincerity, but for what had really changed. And then I asked, what's different now, besides your financial situation? She didn't answer. Not right away. Finally, she said, living without you changed things. Seeing what it really costs to handle everything ourselves. And Maple, she's not just important to you. She's necessary. We didn't get that before. I gave a small nod. No, you didn't. Then I turned and walked away, leaving her standing among the off-brand cereal boxes, an outdated apology. Because understanding comes too late when the damage is already done, and trust doesn't go on sale. Maple was waiting by the door when I got home, tail thumping lazily against the floor. She didn't bark. She never needed to. Her presence was enough. Constant, solid, unwavering. I leaned down, unclipped her leash from the hook, and she immediately stood, alert and ready. Evening sunlight streamed through the window, casting long golden lines across the hardwood. We stepped out into it, side by side, like we had done every day since the moment she became mine. 2 blocks into our walk, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Hey, a familiar voice said. It's Trevor. I stopped walking. Listen, I saw this dog at the pound today. German Shepherd mix, looks smart. Thought maybe you'd want another one. You know, like a backup or something. A photo came through, grainy, a sad-eyed mutt sitting behind metal bars. I stared at it. I didn't reply. Instead, I deleted the message. Because that's what it was, a message. One that told me, even now, Trevor still didn't get it. That to him, Maple was replaceable, interchangeable, that a $25,000 medical lifeline could be swapped for any dog with a heartbeat. He hadn't learned a thing. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I looked down. Maple was sniffing a patch of dandelions, blissfully unaware of how close she'd come to being erased. Or maybe not unaware. Maybe she knew everything in her quiet, knowing way. She looked up at me just then, brown eyes calm, ears twitching at my smallest movements. She'd always known when I was on the edge, and she'd always pulled me back. We kept walking, past the picket fences and blooming hedges, past the children playing hopscotch in fading sunlight. My shoulders relaxed with every step. My breath eased. My chest felt lighter. My phone was back in my pocket, silenced and forgotten. At the end of the block, we turned toward home. Our home. Because this wasn't just about Maple. It wasn't even just about the betrayal. It was about finally realizing what I deserved. Respect, autonomy, peace. And no one, not even blood, got to take that from me again. Maple trotted ahead, slightly, tail swaying like a banner. And for the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged.